Welcome everyone to Jugalbandi, the interplay between architect B.V. Doshi and artist M.F. Husain. My name is Asad Ali Jaffrey, and I'm the executive director here at South Asia Institute. We are partnering today with our neighbors to the north of us, Wrightwood 659, and we would like to thank them, especially Ashley and Brad, for this collaboration. I'd also like to thank the Alphawood Foundation and Alphawood Exhibitions. Wrightwood 659 currently has a phenomenal exhibition on the work of Balakrishna Doshi, Architecture for the People. And because of the pandemic, it's unfortunately not open right now. However, it is definitely the inspiration for this program. We've called this program Jugalbandi, which in a South Asian context, most often refers to a performative or musical collaboration. And in some ways, this program itself is a Jugalbandi between SAI and Wrightwood 659. Of course, however, we are here to speak of the Jugalbandi or collaboration between two icons and masters of their forms, the architect B.V. Doshi and the late artist M.F. Husain. We have with us three presenters who will speak to us about the work of Doshi and Husain, as well as their Jugalbandi, and both the mythical and cultural aspects integrated into their collaboration in creating the Amdavad Gufa. To introduce our panelists and moderate this discussion, I'd like you to join me in welcoming one of the founders of South Asia Institute, Dr. Shireen Ahmad.
Thank you, Asad. Welcome, everyone. Peace and greetings from the South Asia Institute. As Asad said, today we are very excited to share with you some of the insights into the life and careers of these two extraordinary South Asians, not that well known to a lot of people outside of the art or architecture arena. Our panelists today are truly exciting. They both knew these individuals personally, and I'm sure that you're going to enjoy hearing what they have to say about these two individuals. Our first speaker today is Dr. Arathi Kaniker, who has a professional degree in architecture from the Institute of Engineering and Technology in India, and a master's degree from MIT in Boston, and a PhD from the Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Georgia. Her research focuses on the issues of design formulation, more specifically representation and spatial construction of meaning and morphologic studies in intermedia translations. She worked in the office of B.V. Doshi in India on large institutional projects, as well as the conservation and tourism development projects in India. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Arathi Kanekar. Arathi, over to you.
Thank you, Shireen. Thank you to both you and Afzal for inviting me, and Asad, Vedran, and everyone at SAI Chicago for organizing this event, and all of you who are virtually joining us over this weekend. So when Shireen told me about this event, Jugalbandi, to discuss the interaction between Doshi and Husain with regards to the Husain Doshi Gufa, or what is now called Amdavad Gufa, I immediately thought about what constitutes disciplinary boundaries and interactions, especially since both the architect and the painter who collaborated to create the Gufa were, in their own words, challenging their own disciplines, architecture and painting. Both men were celebrated, both men were celebrated legends in their own disciplines. For Doshi, by the time he worked on the Gufa, he had a well-established practice of over 40 years. And he designed everything from low-cost housing, the Aranya low-cost housing project. You see his own house, Kamala House, in the images below. On public buildings such as the Tagore Hall, the Premabhai Hall, institutional buildings like the LD Institute of Indology. All three of these projects are in Ahmedabad. He worked on other major institutional buildings like the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore. This is the project that I worked on a little bit while I was interning in his office, which happened to be my first job. And his own office, Sangat, which has some of the aspects that you can recognize in the Gufa. The main institutional buildings that he is very well known for is, of course, CEPT, the Center for Environmental Planning and Technology in Ahmedabad, and the adjoining Kanoria Art Center, which was part of the CEPT campus, but is linked to it now. So Doshi's own conception of in kind of multidisciplinarity is best seen through CEPT in Ahmedabad, which is a kind of key institution to understand his own ideas of disciplinarity. So in 1962, he established the School of Architecture, which was grounded on his belief of nourishing disciplinary interactions. And to kind of foster the dialogue between students and faculty alike, the building is thought as a free-flowing space without necessarily doors in between. So what you see are doors that kind of swing open to the outside, but internally it kind of opens pretty easily and connects spaces. And this school was thought to be kind of much more conducive to exchange of ideas. And even with the campus, after the School of Architecture, they added the School of Planning, the School of Building Construction followed, the Hathi Singh Visual Arts Center that exhibited painting, sculptures, and performing arts was linked to the campus, and so was Kanoria Art Center. So CEPT as a campus was quite indicative of the importance of Doshi's emphasis on disciplinary interactions. So when Husain told Doshi that he wanted to have a gallery in Amdavad, Doshi first mentions of challenging him. And the challenge was that he himself, as an architect, would not do a typical art gallery or a typical architectural condition and go underground, and that Husain, as a painter, would not do a typical painting. To that end, the design of the Gufa as such is that it doesn't have any straight wall that you would think about in a standard art gallery, which is conducive to hanging paintings, and cannot be considered as typologically a gallery with white walls. And in that sense, it fundamentally questions the discipline of architecture through ideas of function and typology. The paintings, if you think about them, in most art galleries are created prior to the architecture that houses them or created separately. There have, of course, been in situ artworks and sculptures wherein the built condition is in place prior to the artwork. But in most galleries, that's not the case. So with the Gufa, it's the architecture that serves as a canvas to painting. The construction and the technology of this project was quite tricky, which leads to the columns and walls that are not orthogonal, but slanted at different angles. And in this way, it has a direct effect on painting. In fact, it's often said that for many years, Husain did not paint anything inside the Gufa. In one of the interviews, Doshi talks about Husain being frustrated when he first came to the completed project with Chester Hurwitz, who was carrying a canvas and could not hang it anywhere since the walls, the floor, the roof were all undulating. And Doshi had to remind him of what they had agreed on, that he would do something different, and that it wouldn't be a typical architectural project, and Doshi and Husain wouldn't do what was normatively considered as painting. This challenge, in a way, triggers Husain to paint the Gufa ceiling, and in the process creates one of the largest in situ Husain paintings. But nevertheless, for a long time, there was only a black line that Husain painted, which went across the walls and ceiling. To this condition, he later added cutouts, which inhabited the interior space. And a large model of the Gufa that was made in Doshi's office was sent to Husain, who painted the model first before the actual space itself. So in that sense, he worked much like an architect instead of a painter, since the architect does not work directly with the object of thought, but rather indirectly with an intervening medium in form of drawings and paintings. So with Husain, that became kind of a difference in probably the manner in which he worked. And what makes the experience of the Gufa brilliant is the changing nature of spatial experience that that impacts the painting. The sunlight, shadows change during the daytime to brighten or to kind of darken areas as if to dissolve the painted surface. So depending on when you see the ceiling and the walls, it is a different experience, and you see almost a different painting, so to speak. Spatially, as you move within the gallery, the perspectival conditions change and your experience of the painting changes with it. The climatic concerns in Amdavad were quite important for this project. And Doshi refers to the intense heat of Ahmedabad in many of the conversations that he has with Husain. And the Gufa is designed to give relief through certain conditions, such as the decision to make underground buried spaces, earth raised volumes of domes that have China mosaic finish, which is a waste material and is reused, which reflects the hot sun. And now all these design moves are also present in Doshi's repertoire. So if you think about a lot of works in the 1980s and 90s, such as this particular one, which is Sangat, which is Doshi's own office, you see that it's partially buried. So the studios that you see people working in, that's the first vault in the front, which is partially buried. It is covered with China mosaic on the roof vaults. The earth mounds, which are present in the Gufa that you see on the right, are also there in one of the early works of Doshi, which is the Sept campus with the School of Architecture behind it. So it's kind of dug in such a way, and the mounds are created so that the cool breezes would blow through these openings. So climatically, these conditions are there in some of the other works. While his own office, Sangat, and the Gandhi Labor Institute complex has individual walls, the difference with the Gufa is that the cave-like structure is continuous, and it forms a natural sag of cloth with its roof, with all the interconnected domes made from a thin ferrocement covering that you can see under construction in these images. It's here, there's been discussions of the tortoise shell inspired roof and which is the white mosaics that cover it, and the mythical snake, which is the black mosaics, which I think Pallavi will talk about a lot later. The entire design is made up of kind of circles and ellipses. The images of Husain drawing the serpent is what you see here. And these were the parts that were covered with black mosaic tiles that are evident in the photographs. And the entire construction is with this intersecting circles which flow into one another and sit within the natural landscape, which is created both and on one end with very high-tech computer-aided design, but on the other end, through very low-tech means, wherein simple hand tools were used by tribal women to do the ferrocement work. Now, in a lot of Doshi's work, architecture for people is a very important theme, and architecture can be thought about as a frame for life that goes on. These are some of the miniatures that were done in the mid-80s when I was working there, which was for the Vidyanagar master plan. And what is emphasized is almost kind of the activities that go on and the way people live. So Doshi's work, in a way, is predominantly about people, and the Gufa in that sense is no different. So from the very program, which is of the Gufa, which is not a typical gallery per se, but rather a place for literary discussions and meetings that Husain had imagined, to the design which is set in the landscape of mountain stairs. This is something that you see in other projects also. So the top images are the Sept campus with the School of Architecture, where stairs were used by students for meetings, to have a cup of tea, to talk to one another across studios that are above it. Doshi's own office has a similar kind of conception where you have the stairs outside. We used to have lunch there quite often when I was there, and I think it would probably be continuing to this day. And you see the Gufa, which does something similar with people sitting on the landscape stairs on top. So it's very much conducive to kind of participation, and it's meant for people to come together. So if you consider Sept campus, where interactions between people and spaces are emphasized, you see that quite deliberately done, where you would have not just the stairs, but the openings in such a way that you kind of have dialogues with one another. You interact a lot more because of the way spaces open up. It's also conducive for changing the kind of activities, pulling up table tennis tables in areas which were used for other purposes, probably an hour back. They do a lot of reviews here where they pull up screens and change the organization of the space. So in such, the spaces naturally encourage participation, and they are celebrated in Doshi's work. So therefore, one can see kind of design moves which are there in the Sept campus at IIM Bangalore, which are conducive to participation, which are also present in the Gufa, but the manner in which they come together in this composition to create the whole is what makes them singular. It's ultimately the questioning of disciplinary norms, be it the question of function or typology in Doshi's work, or painting in Husain's, that makes this project truly remarkable. So in one of the interviews, Doshi talks about architecture that does not need to have a specific purpose, and what gives you joy and makes you smile cannot be measured. And I would say the Gufa certainly constitutes one such space. Thank you.
Thank you, Arathi, for walking us through those wonderful buildings. Almost makes you want to be there in person. And hopefully one of these days soon, we'll be traveling again. Our next speaker is Kishore Singh. Kishore is a well-known columnist, writer, and editor. He's been associated with publishing, media, and the art world as a curator and an author. And he has taught classes in art appreciation and has played a key role in popularizing art in the mainstream. He's based in Delhi, India, where he continues to research and write about pre-modern and modern Indian art. We are really excited to have Kishore with us today. Over to you now, Kishore.
Thank you, Shireen. I'm really excited. When we first met and talked about the South Asia Institute, it was something that I was delighted about. The whole aspect of South Asian art coming to America, people seeing a great body of work that has been created by artists in this part of the world, not very well known, unfortunately. So I'm really, really delighted to be part of this conversation. I'm also going to run you through this presentation, talking more about Husain, his work, his life, and then we'll get into whatever Jugalbandi we get into when we have our conversation and our questions. So on the screen, if I can move it up, here we go. For me, and I think this is very, very interesting that Aarati took us through images of the Gufa. The very first time that I met Husain Saab was when he was working on a hotel project in 1982 in New Delhi. He was creating a mural in the middle of the lobby, and there were these pillars going up, and there was this cavernous kind of roof on top where the mural was supposed to be housed. In a sense, it was preceding what happened at the Gufa in terms of both the kind of architecture and the kind of work. Of course, he had to paint on board or on canvas and fit the mural into spaces on the ceiling. However, the very idea or the very notion of painting on the ceiling, of looking at aspects of life, etc., over there, came perhaps from that. Husain Saab, of course, would be kind of going up the scaffolding, making sure that the paintings were being put into place, working around with workers, sitting on the floor, having chai. This was at a time when celebrity-dom had still not arrived in India. So Husain Saab could move around in public without being troubled. That was not to be. A portrait of Husain Saab, a self-portrait as a young boy, and of course his very famous horses. And you see an image here of the Progressive Artists Group, which in 1947 came and defined a new set of modernism for a new young nation that had taken birth that year. It was put together by a bunch of 6 artists. Husain Saab is the second on the right, and you can see them at an opening in 1948. Of course, over the years, what happened was Husain Saab continued to become the showman of the show, the absolute showman of Indian modern art, largely because Sousa and Raza left the country. They went off to London, to Paris, and the mantle of Indian modernism, in a sense, the baton was handed to him. This is a man who, at the start of his career, was someone who was shy, was reticent, was quiet, not very fluent in the English language, etc. And yet he grew into that role. He became this larger-than-life person who walked around with his, paintbrush, walked through security in airports, etc. Was barefoot, lean, this very ascetic-looking person. And you met him intermittently. I would interview him. I would meet him at people's homes. The interesting thing was that this was a man of amazing charisma. So all eyes kind of automatically diverted towards this man when he walked into the room. Yet over the course of the evening, he would kind of settle off, find a quiet little corner, and he would sit there to observe people. Though he liked being the center of attention, beyond a certain point in time, he also liked moving away from that circle of light to actually sit and observe people. And I think that was one of his amazing characteristics. Another portrait, you have Husain himself as a young child and his grandfather, who was very fond of. The two shared a very, very special relationship, and his grandfather makes an appearance very often within his paintings, sometimes as the person, but often also represented through aspects of his life, whether it's an umbrella or an oil lantern, or even horses' shoes, because he was a farrier who would shod horses' feet, etc., or certainly his friend was. Hussain Saab, of course, the great showman, very fond of his bikes, cars, etc. He came to be regarded as the face of Indian modernism, but there was also a very sharp quality that this man had in terms of observing life around him, looking at structures around him. When he exhibited, don't forget that there was the Bombay Art Society, which had kind of stultified into an organization that annually did shows that were based on still lives, landscapes, or portraits of a certain academic colonial structure. And he was one of the very few people who broke away from structures like that to bring that level or breadth of freshness to Indian art practice. And you'll see an amazing body of work that he did. Here, of course, the three graces. This amazing work, the rivers Ganga and Yamuna, painted on the ceiling of the DLF headquarters in New Delhi, represents also the city of New Delhi and the history of this very ancient city. Or paintings like this, where he was able to combine the secular and the sacred on the same image. An amazing ability that he was able to pull off. And a great favorite of mine, there's the notion in Indian classical art of the Naika, the woman waiting for her beloved to join her for a night of lovemaking. It was a trope that was practiced by the miniature painters, whether in the Mughal school or the Pahari miniatures, or in fact, the Rajput miniature paintings. And here is his very modernistic take on the same subject, and he does it brilliantly. An aspect of Hussain Saab's life that I think is interesting to know is how competitive he was. He was competitive as a painter, he was competitive in the marketplace. He wanted his work to be recognized as among the very best of Indian art that was created. And he also sought to establish a kind of value between the kind of art he created and the kind of value it commanded in the market. So, of course, there are these stories, and you hear many, many of them, including one where his work was shown alongside that of S.H. Raza's in a group show. And he was highly offended when he walked in and he saw that the prices for Raza's works were placed above his own. So he removed his works from the show and walked off in a huff and came back or returned to the gallery the next day carrying fresh artworks, which were works that had been made in the same style as Raza Saab's. And he insisted that they be placed there at the same price point as Raza's. So there was, of course, this little very interesting interlude, etc. And the gallerist then allowed him to place his original artworks back in the gallery at the price points that were comparable to the others. But more than anything else, and I think this is the very interesting aspect of Hussain Saab, he removed this entire sense of mystery around what modern art is. Modern art is still, modern art, contemporary art has been difficult to kind of establish to the general public in India, who are not very fond of going into galleries or museums. So he took art out of the gallery, pretty much as his effort with the Gufa in Amdavad. He was known, for example, to arrive in a city ahead of an exhibition and paint while there. He was a spontaneous painter. He was a fast painter. He was a prolific painter, but he also painted on the spot. And I don't think there are very many artists who can boast of being able to complete works of art at that speed. Beside that strength, he was able to also come out to public platforms, take art onto a public platform, paint on a platform, often in a Jugalbandi or collaboration such as the one that we're talking about today with a musician. The utter confidence to be able to do it on a public platform, to paint in front of the public, and yet to be the face of Indian art, took a certain kind of courage and that Hussain Saab, of course, had in plenty. A Jugalbandi of two works that I've juxtaposed. The one on the left represents a work that you often see in classical temple sculpture across India, the whole idea of this woman having a bath or coming out from a toilet, etc., and a playful monkey trying to pulling at her dress, etc. A play on sexuality, of course, but also intrinsically linked to Indian culture and Indian art practices over centuries. And on the right side, an early work from his career called Harvest Drummers, which also speaks about the kind of people who were an important facet of his art-making process itself. Again, two works from two vastly different periods of his life. From his early career on the left, representing the sacred, that's an image of the three-headed Brahma, and on the right, a work from much later in his career representing Gandhi. And you can see that there is a certain continuity in his language, which is interesting, and which became a marker of the Husain style of painting. Now, it was famously said of Husain Saab that he was both prince and pauper. He enjoyed the company of very rich patrons and surrounded himself with the powerful, yet he was able to have tea by the roadside in chipped glasses with the common person. His generosity in sharing his works with people from all walks of life was funded by this very popularity and patronage. Husain Saab would walk into your house, he would doodle, leave you little gifts, he would arrive unannounced with a bag of groceries, ask you to cook him a meal. He would, if you were not at home, he would leave behind a painting for you to collect from your doorstep, etc. That kind of generosity was something that came naturally to him. And it was something that he sustained throughout his career. Two works from his toy series, now, in the late 40s, early 50s, he joined a furniture factory and he designed children's nurseries. And these figures, which you see as a part of his art practice throughout the 50s, the same figures, etc., appear on his canvases or on his watercolors, wash paintings, etc., were used as embellishments on top of chairs or bedposts, etc., and are now huge collectibles with collectors in the art world. And of course, his ability to tell great stories from the epics. This painting of Bhishma Pitama from the Mahabharata. Bhishma Pitama is one of the most iconic characters in the Mahabharata. And he had the boon of immortality, so he could choose the time of his death. And you see him lying on a bed of arrows when he was shot in the back, etc. He lay on this bed of arrows till the conclusion of the battle of Mahabharata. To see the way the battle ended, and then renounce his life. Of course, another work from his idea of what Indian civilization, etc., was all about. Now, there was a time when an industrialist kind of mocked him and said, Husain Saab, all you do is make paintings for the rich, the powerful, and the famous, which Husain Saab took as a kind of personal insult. So he created this suite of paintings based on the Ramayana, large paintings, mind you, which he then mounted on bullock carts. And then he sent them through villages of Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh, etc. So people could actually see his works, not in a gallery, not in that kind of setting at all, on the back of bullock carts, a series of them going through village after village. And it didn't really matter what the people understood of his art, but there's an instinctive understanding of the epics in this country. And I think they responded or reacted to that. So what transpired was Husain again was able to create an opportunity from a chance remark, etc., proving how that showmanship with regard to the art world kind of came naturally to him. Over the years, of course, he came to be regarded as painter of horses, and we gather that he painted his first horse after a visit to China, where he saw paintings of horses by a Chinese master artist, and he brought that whole idea and revoked this whole idea of childhood and watching processions, whether it was Maharram or princely processions, etc. And they became very much a part of his career. So much so that over a period of time, people started calling him the painter of horses. It was an easy subject for young collectors to understand when you didn't understand the context of so much else in terms of modernism, etc. And I think it would not be boasting to say that any young person, young collector starting his journey of collecting, whether it's in contemporary art or of course modern art, will first say, I want to work by Husain Saab as a very interesting, important part of the collecting journey. Of course, over a period of time, he went on to paint his series of the Raj or Mother Teresa, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, various epics, etc., etc. And I mean, that resonance of just painting the horses became just one subsect of the kind of subjects he's interested in. Now, it's interesting also to know that he began his career by painting, cinema hoardings, marquee posters, etc. And therefore, very naturally, he was surrounded by performing artists, whether they were singers or musicians or dancers or performers. And this soon grew to include farmers, potters, and so on and so forth. And I think that began to change a little bit from the mid-60s onwards, and of course through the 70s as aspects of patronage came in. And that's when he started painting the epics through the 70s. The horses became a way to reach out to a much larger audience. And the idea of a syncretic India that always appealed to him led to his creation of paintings of whether it was Ashoka or Buddha or Gandhi or Mother Teresa. And by the end of his life, of course, he was propelled to start painting the great religions. So he would paint Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, etc., of course. But he also accepted two extremely large commissions towards the end of his career, which was the Mithil Commission in London to paint the entire Indian civilization, a suite that was never, of course, completed, but part of which was shown at the Victoria and Albert Museum soon after his death, and the Qatar Commission from the royal family to paint a history of Islam. The figure, which was always central to his art practice, the woman who was always his muse, a favorite subject other than horses. Now, Husain Saab was a Renaissance man, and he had many, many interests, but I think his abiding interest above all was cinema. And as early as in 1967, he created he produced a documentary, directed a documentary called Through the Eyes of a Painter, which is a painter's journey through Rajasthan, this land of great color, etc., that he shot specifically in black and white, his way of always doing something through an alternate lens rather than the popular lens. But the film went on to win the Golden Bear Award in Berlin in 1967. But by the time he donned the mantle of filmmaker, producer, director, scriptwriter, etc., it was much later in his career. He was fascinated by Bollywood, by Madhuri Dixit, by Tabu, by lots of other actresses. And his storyline in feature film after feature film that he produced was his quest, his search for the perfect woman, the perfect lover, the perfect mother, all ephemeral figures that he knitted into somehow his own autobiographical narrative. But let us not forget too, that a former love of his did him the favor of returning several decades after they were presented to her, a suite of as many as 80 paintings, just a few years before Husain Saab passed away. And that suite of 80 paintings now is in called the Maria series, of course, is in a single collection, but only someone from Husain Saab's life could have given back or returned a gift as precious as 80 paintings. That's an amazing, amazing story somewhere. He was, of course, painting towards all through, till the very, very end. And this painting, as I learned, was something that he created towards the end of his career, showing his birth. He was always fascinated by the idea of his mother, and very often he saw his mother's visage in Mother Teresa's face, which is why he never paints Mother Teresa's face, leaves it a blank, etc. That sense of loss that caused by the death of his mother empowers his art throughout his life. Which leads me now to my conclusion. Husain the person, Husain the artist was a chimera. He was different for every person, a changeling like Quicksilver, which is why you have so many versions of the many myths he nurtured around himself. For example, why did he go barefoot? Because his mother never saw him step into his father's shoes, he told one person. Because he walked barefoot to the grave of a former flame, he told a reporter. Because he was so troubled by atrocities, acts of violence, his way of expressing remorse, he said to a collector. Now, take the one you prefer, pick the story that you like more, but make no mistake, Husain Saab was the greatest moving force of the 20th century Indian art, and generations will be grateful that he carried the torch of Indian modernism so others might follow, not in his path, but at least in the direction he showed them. Thank you. It's over to you, Shireen.
Thank you so much, Kishore. That was a wonderful presentation, and I'm sure that our audience enjoyed hearing your insight into Husain, an artist who has been misinterpreted by so many people. And hearing from you, who's had so much interaction with him, makes all the difference. Thank you again. Our next speaker is Pallavi Swaranjali, and she has a BA in architecture and a master's in industrial design from India. She currently lives in Ottawa, Canada, where she's a full-time faculty member in the interior design department at Algonquin College and a PhD candidate at Carleton University. Her research centers on the relationship between architecture and storytelling, looking at unconventional modes of architectural representation, which combine the normative and the fantastical, and the ways in which they transform architectural making and experience. And with that, I'll pass it on to Pallavi.
Thank you for the introduction, Shireen, and thank you to Wrightwood 659 and the South Asia Institute for this opportunity. And welcome and thank you also to all of you, the audience who have tuned in. Hope all of you are safe and healthy wherever you are. I will quickly share my screen before I start my presentation. Okay, so my story begins in 2015 when, through a research grant, I visited India in Amdavad to visit Balkrishna Doshi's office in which is called Sangat. When I met him, the first thought that came to my mind was a man of such a stature, but with such humility, and his whole persona as a storyteller was very intriguing, and that whole experience in itself was very intriguing for me, and I could probably go on for hours talking about that. But one thing that I really was fascinated by, and it happened so that in the conversations I had with him, Doshi himself suggested that I look at 3 of his written stories, which had not been studied by that time. And Doshi was the one who suggested I look at it. And these 3 stories accompanied 3 of his built works. One was the National Institute of Fashion Technology, which is in Delhi. The other, the Bharat Diamond Bourse in Mumbai, and the Amdavad Gufa that we've been talking about today. And for me, this was fascinating because architecture normally is seen as a tangible piece of work made of brick and mortar. But here, Doshi presented to me another mode of architecture, as made of words. So an architecture made of words, which was very fascinating to me. So when I started reading those stories, and particularly the Gufa story that I will be talking about today, I found some of Doshi's condensed ruminations, which also are very evident in his other works that I think Aarati mentioned in the beginning. So through the study of these stories, I found another aspect of the Gufa. It really uncovered the essence of Jugalbandi for me, which was demonstrated in the conceptualization of the Gufa. So briefly, as Asad had mentioned in the beginning, what Jugalbandi means, it's a very musical term, especially in Hindustani or Indian classical music. And it is this playful competition between either it can be vocal or it can be in musical instruments, or it can be between musicians from different traditions. So it is a playful and alternating competition between the musicians where they challenge each other. But also in the process, the exploration is taken to a different level of innovativeness and ingenuity. So when Husain and Doshi got together, and we've heard about these masters from the previous speakers, you can imagine how Jugalbandi happened at various levels. So interesting to note here is also the fact that Doshi has been known for his institutional and housing projects. Now here he is faced with designing for a singular artist, that is Husain, and he is asked to design, or he is about to design a gallery for the exhibition of his work. But no, that's where Doshi comes in, and he really transforms the project, which is of such a nature of displaying work for a singular artist into, again, an architecture for the people. And that is also, if at Wrightwood, the exhibition that is going on is called Architecture for the People. So this singular artist's works exhibition is converted into an architecture for the people, and we'll see how that happens. So it does, the Gufa does not remain a conventional artist's gallery, but it is transformed into a site for discourse where artist and architect, art and architecture, technology and craft, myth and reality, all of these come into a conversation in a Jugalbandi that brings forth facets of each of these individually, but also in a rhythmic construction. So Doshi and Husain met several times in Ahmedabad, but on one such occasion, Husain mentioned that he wanted to establish a gallery of his works in Ahmedabad. And in their conversations, Doshi suggested the idea of building a gufa or a cave, but also as a means to deal with the oppressive and hot weather conditions that are known in Ahmedabad. So the mythic and the enigmatic forms of the gufa at once, of course, gained the attention of Husain, and then the Ahmedabad Gufa came to be. The conceptualization started somewhere around 1991, and the construction happened in 1994. Interesting to note here is also that it is located near Sept. Aarati introduced us to Sept, but that's where Doshi established his school for architecture. So it also provides this site for discourse for architecture students who are enrolled in this Center for Environmental Planning and Technology. So that project then quickly turned into a process in which Husain and Doshi now started to challenge each other. They started to explore how art and architecture could question and interpret each other. So the resulting underground art gallery was called, again, Amdavad Gufa because of the subterranean forms. And through the built form, the curved walls, the architect really challenged the artist. Now, Husain could not hang any paintings on the curvilinear walls and had instead to actually use the walls and ceiling as his canvas. So coming to the written story that Doshi has for Gufa, it's called The Revelation. and it gathers a wide range of sources of inspiration for the Gufa. So it does blend formal references with an account of the Gufa, of how the Gufa was made. So there is this fascinating combination of what actually happened on the site versus some amount of fiction and mythology that Doshi introduces. It was, again, a Jugalbandi between traditional means of construction through the tribals who made the Gufa possible, and of course the digital that was used to conceptualize the Gufa. So according to the story that Doshi wrote, after failed attempts to find a form for the Gufa, Doshi visited the site in search for a clue. And that night, he had a dream in which the body of a large tortoise-like form appeared to him. And this was like the mythological Kurma, the avatar of Lord Vishnu. It was the second avatar of Lord Vishnu, who is seen as the preserver of cosmic order in Hindu mythology. Unlike a normal tortoise, the one in Doshi's dream was long and had two large mouths, one at each end, interconnected with shells of different shapes and sizes. The tortoise questioned Doshi's approach to architecture. So at once, Doshi introduces a myth here that converts the formal image of architecture into an apparatus of imaginative dreaming. So if I can quote here from the story, Doshi writes, Kurma emphasized how the definition of space and form were gradually being dissolved three-dimensionally, and how the sky was becoming part of the interior spaces. He even talked about optical illusions and how they are essential to make us realize that the space and form that we are a part of the infinite, and hence timeless and illusory. The tortoise urged him to think beyond the functional, to bring about a seamless integration of space and structure in a form akin to a living being. In short, what I want to do, said Kurma in the dream, is start afresh. Forget that you're an architect and design this building using your innermost sensibility. Become and be part of the process rather than an outsider. So here, this is the fictional aspect describing the dream that Doshi had that led him to the form that he developed. The story then goes on to also describe how he actually carried forth the design process, where from sketches of the Gufa and other objects, for example, soap bubbles, mimicking the form that Doshi had seen in the dream, he developed a series of thermocol and clay models. And in his playful way, Doshi also describes how he shook the model and that led the model to collapse, giving him the idea of how these forms can be made so that the forces and thrust cancel each other, and a very free-flowing organic form can be developed. So here comes the interweaving of the fantastical aspects of the story and the realities of the project and the site and the modes of construction therein. So this, again, when he got this organic form, it required a rethinking of standard construction methods and technologies. So Husain and Doshi then went for ferrocement technology, and the structure was of a very light steel reinforcement, which was wrapped in chicken wire mesh and covered by a rich mortar mix of cement and sand. And here there were no foundations required because of the nature of the structure. Again, to enhance that cave-like feeling, the contours of the site were retained. Sorry, I will run you through some of the pictures in a bit. But there were no trained masons who were able to make this structure because there were no levels, there wasn't scaffolding that could be made easily. And that's when he sought the help of tribal people. If we go back to the story, in the story, Doshi tells us that Kurma had actually pointed out to him that he should be using different professional help, or taking help from the tribals, from engineers, from masons, from contractors, and really getting them involved in the process rather than it being a very solipsistic approach in which the architect designs, and that's where his job is over, and then it is handed over to a contractor to be built. But this Jugalbandi started to happen in the Gufa, where the architect did not retreat after he had provided drawings for it, but he was involved in the construction process as well. Again, that Jugalbandi, which gives architecture a different character here. So that's when Doshi sought help from the tribal people who could easily adapt their skills of applying clay by hand used in the construction of their mud homes. And they could hand press the mortar around the mesh, and then this was then covered with a compacted layer of vermiculite, followed by a mosaic of pieces of broken china. The porthole windows that you see in these images here were oriented to allow for the light to come in and also mitigate the heat. So once you enter the Gufa, there is this playful play of light, but also you feel very cool there. The whole space is a great respite from the oppressive heat in Ahmedabad. So when the tribal people were constructing this, because of their familiarity with the construction process, they actually started to perform their rituals, their usual rituals of dance and worship around the site, and they did it for 9 days. So because of this connection with how they construct houses for themselves, they were able to, or they felt like bringing in those rituals into the site of the Gufa as well. Then because of this, the rituals and dance of the tribals, with conversations with Doshi, Husain then also painted the mythical cobra, or Sheshnag as it is called, on the exterior of the dome. So you can see it here in the picture. The painting that he did impromptu on site, and then of course it was later built on using china mosaic. And this Sheshnag is, as you might know, one of the primal beings of creation, and he's supposed to hold all the planets of the universe on its many hoods. And Vishnu is depicted to be resting on him. So Doshi's story brings all of these together, as well as his architectural work, which becomes a fantastical mix of fiction, technical knowledge, empirical accounts of events on site. It incorporates hallucinations, dream, mythology together with the happenings of this construction site, so that we look at architecture not only in essentialist or just so terms, but also provisional as if perspectives. There is that connection between realistic description, pragmatic descriptions, and the fictional narrative that goes with it. So the story brings forth the social nature of the Gufa as well, where architectural design, construction, and embellishment came together in an act of fellowship, all with a deeper understanding or with a reference to what it means to make. What is that order that gives shape to things? And that act of fellowship is, of course, continued through the building's use as well. And Doshi's architecture, there are many contributors to the architectural story that Doshi weaves, and many players who make it possible. For example, not only the architect, but the tribals, the artist himself. That Jugalbandi happens at various levels. He brings actuality and fiction together, that in a way that is generative and creative. When they work to render the absurd real and the real absurd, it was and it is by the understanding that pragmatism and fantasy are not antagonistic, but they are fully compatible. One exists with the other. And the stories acted also as a critique for architecture nowadays that we see as very prescriptive, very instrumental, almost like a problem-solving, an aesthetic spectacle that has to be viewed from afar. We are spectators, the architect is the performer, and the performance happens in the viewing of the architectural built work. But he did not criticize this very prescriptive way of looking at architecture. He did not criticize it by calling out what he was trying to criticize. Instead, what he did was he drew people into the thick of architecture as an intense experience that was fully interwoven with their lives. It was practical, perhaps beautiful, but also very poetic, very oniric. And through storytelling, Doshi aimed not to theorize or to explain anything, but to engage at the full depth of the situation that architecture both articulates and embodies, a situation that is concerned with the utilitarian, the historical, the socio-political, the mythological, the personal, the collective. Doshi's work then in this way really fosters that Jugalbandi between the realization that reason and anti-reason, sense and playfulness, design and chance, fact and fantasy, dreaming and reality, private and public, subjective and political, and many such dualities that we see actually belong together as necessary parts of the whole. And all of these come together to complete the story, not only the fictional story, but the architectural story, the story of our own lives. All of these, until they exist together in a Jugalbandi, it does not complete architecture. These are some of the other pictures when I had visited the Gufa. And if you can see the beautiful drawings or the paintings that Husain did on the ceiling and how the light comes in, that instead of having something as an embellishment later, it's that connection between art and architecture that is so visible in the Gufa. Truly a great Jugalbandi between the two. Thank you.
Thank you, Pallavi. And especially, I personally want to thank you for sharing the details of Doshi's dream and how it influenced the building of this iconic building. I think we're going to ask our panelists to join us for a few moments, so we can have a little conversation here, because this is truly an iconic structure and not very well known to people who have not spent significant time in India. Even those who visit, when tourists or visit, we go to the major cities, and it's not very many people take the time to go to Ahmedabad, although it's a very interesting city that has a lot of history and of course, some iconic structures. But the Gufa is also, I think, a very unusual building in that it's really a collaboration between the artist and the architect. I wondered if you would talk about what do you think led to this partnership. I think Kishore will probably agree that nothing really happened by accident with Husain. He planned and staged a lot of the incidents that we remember him by. But both of these people had very strong personalities, and yet it sounds that they were able to work together. So I wonder if you'd like to comment about what your thoughts are.
Absolutely, Shireen, thank you. And lovely presentation, Pallavi, Aarati. This has really, really been wonderful sharing this platform with all of you. Husain Saab definitely planned his accidents. So yes, there was, I can imagine a collaboration like this taking place as he would perhaps build with a musician like Bhimsen Joshi, as he would take ahead with perhaps a fashion icon, etc. There was, Husain Saab was an amazing person in many, many ways, much sharper, much brighter, more creative, and much more of a Renaissance man than he's been given credit for. We see him very often as merely an artist, and unfortunately the end of his life and career came under the cloud of a certain controversy, which is not worth wasting our time on, or at least on this platform. But yes, he would look for opportunities to do things that were beyond the pale of just any other artist. So he would put together a show, for example, where he would announce an opening. India had experienced, for example, the Gulf War and the horror of the Gulf War and what it did to the world. So when he had an opening, he put together this so-called exhibition, installation, call it what you will, invited the press, nobody knew what was happening inside. So the doors were flung open on that evening of the exhibition. You walked in, there were no lights on, other than a few pinpricks of light somewhere. And you walked through this a floor littered with newspapers, papers, crumpled, etc. So the sound of walking over this crackling sense of something created his resonance of an alternate reality. Husain Saab was very much a person who liked to control a certain situation. I can imagine his dialogues with Doshi, the kind of conversations they would have had, his remarks, etc., that he would like to see this kind of organic space where addabazi would happen. He was a great person for, this was a man who, despite being competitive, also brought in people into the fold, welcomed people into his world. So when the artist Krishan Khanna, who was then working with the Gridleys Bank of India, decided that he would leave the corporate world, etc., and walk out, it was Husain Saab who was waiting there to welcome him, take off his tie and say, welcome to our world, etc. So yes, he wanted to create these opportunities for people to come in and discover art, to be a part of it, the mainstreaming of art, getting away from the white cube walls, etc., because he knew that's where the patronage came from the rich, etc. Don't forget that he wanted to bring art to the mainstream. But there are two telling things. One, I think when Aarati, for example, suggested that Husain walks in and sees the space and is kind of upset that he cannot hang his works, etc. Now that's the kind of throw-off that would be typical of Husain, who would have had these dialogues, discussions, and then walked off and gone off into alternate modes and carried on with his life, perhaps not even acknowledging the fact that this Gufa was coming up somewhere and that he would have to go and do something over there. That he could do it, of course, we know because he made these huge cinema hoardings and he had a sense of perspective, etc. So it would really be no challenge for him to create that work of art at all. The other, and I think it's a very interesting point that we see developing from his art, we know that his conversations about organic space, trees, etc. with Doshi may have gone in one direction. But for him, this whole sense of loss of his mother and his quest for searching for his mother all through his life would have also led to him suggesting that the architecture also have something to do with the womb. And this is something that I think has not been talked about. But for me, very much that cavern space, those caves, etc., are also reminiscent of the womb. And the fact that he paints inside the womb is very much a characteristic of Husain Saab that I would like to suggest to this platform.
Yes, and that's something also that Ila Pal, who was very close to Husain, has also suggested. I wonder if you want to comment, any one of you. People have also talked about the Gufa for Husain as being reminiscent of the tomb of the pharaohs, because he had books and paintings and a lot of other things inside the Gufa. Was this something that you've heard him talk about or referenced? Any one of you?
I wouldn't say I had directly heard him talk about that. He has talked about how he wanted it like a literary adda, so to speak, kind of a place for discussions. So having other things there would not be unusual. I do want to go back to what Kishore was talking about earlier, because I would say Doshi also, in a sense, there wouldn't be complete accidents. There are, of course, happy accidents with Doshi. There have been discussions with Husain for 30 years prior to the Gufa being built. Husain used to come very often to Ahmedabad, as all of you would know, because his grandfather is buried here. And so there's a connect to the city, and he was from Sidhpur. And so he was very familiar with the place. He used to come often. He used to meet Doshi. And every time there have been discussions about, the heat of Ahmedabad, climatically, how hard it is. And then that he wanted, and one of the things he told Doshi, mujhe gallery chahiye, which is in India. I want to have a gallery in the city. And Doshi at that time, who was very much connected to the Amdavad Education Society, which is where the SEPT is part of the Amdavad Education Society campus, took him to say, there's this plot of land behind SEPT. So we could have your gallery here. So there have been discussions of that. And in 1984, I remember when we had the celebration of the 25 years of the School of Architecture, that time Doshi had come, and all of us, it's a second year student, I was a second year student, we sat around and he did what Kishore was calling on the spot painting. So he had this big canvas, and like the showman that he was, he completed the painting. And so there were these innumerable visits to the city, and there were discussions with Doshi. And that, of course, he would have probably forgotten that they challenged to have something unusual done. So that would be very much possible. The womb idea I have heard about, which could be very possible. The pharaoh tomb idea I hadn't heard about. I haven't come across anything either of them have directly said in relation to that. I would be curious if Pallavi has heard about that from anywhere. But the kind of discussions, I would say, between the two went back for 30 years about wanting to do a project like this.
I would say probably, I haven't heard of that either, Aarati, but definitely this idea would have appealed to them, maybe due to different reasons, because, with Doshi, the mythological aspect, even the idea of mythological stories where Gufas and such enigmatic spaces form a big part of these stories, that attracted him. And probably Husain had a different set of inspirations and associations that led them to conceive it as a Gufa. And I think those really brought it together for both of them. And in having no pre-planned agendas, and because they were such strong personalities, that they actually started to take up the challenge that the other posed. And that was really something fascinating, which, as Shireen, you rightly mentioned, they are strong personalities. And because they were such, they were open to experimentation. They were open to questions and discourse around not just the physical form of the gallery, but what does a gallery mean? What can it be? What does it want to be? Such questions started to come up with such strong minds working together.
Yeah, yeah.
If I
So
can
we have
quickly
a question.
add,
Yeah, go ahead.
Shireen, just to kind of round this off, to my mind, yes, of course, he was fascinated by Egypt and the tombs and this whole pharaohic nature of representation of, life after death. But to my mind, and one of his best known series of works and the best known painting, Between the Spider and the Lamp, comes after a visit to Egypt, of course. But Hussein, despite wanting to have himself memorialized, have these museums about himself, etc., would not like a reference to a tomb-like structure or a tomb. He was very much a person of the living. And I think the very fact that you've got those silhouette-like sculptures that he's created in the Gufa, talk about the shadows, life, living, etc., etc. And I think that would have been very much on his mind rather than an entombing somehow within the Gufa.
For me, it is like Plato's tomb idea, almost when I see the cutouts, because it's the shadow of the figures. And so it takes me back to the Platonic story very much with the shadowy figures. Now, none of them reference that though, but that's what it reminds me of, because that's the first thing that he brought into the gallery.
Interesting. So we have a question for Pallavi from our audience. What is the construction process rendered by the traditional tribal called?
Yeah, I saw that, and I'm sorry, I don't know the exact name of, but I can find that out and get back to the person. If Aarati, do you know the name that the tribals use for?
They call it lipan in the Gujarat region. So it's essentially taking mud, and the lipan can happen with geru, which is a colored substance that is put on the walls. And the tribals do that with a wire measured time, like they're very thin structures which are created, and it's called, the act is called lipan.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So we have one other question. In your opinion, and I think we can pose this to all three of you, in your opinion, does the significance of the Gufa lie in the creative process or in the final space?
I think it's all about the process, and the product transpires out of it. And that is something which is the most fascinating aspect of the Gufa. This process where the construction happens, there is a form that is developed, but then how do we construct it? That's the next question that is posed. So then there comes the tribals, there comes the introduction of construction methods. There comes the idea of how will Hussein now paint on these walls? So it's that constant evolution of the project. At every stage probably appears a challenge, a question, and the architect, everyone involved in the Gufa is coming together collectively to answer those questions. It is definitely, for me, the process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say that for professionals, it would be the process. So as an architect, I would say, yes, process. But I think even the product is as important, because the way people use the space, the way people transform the space after the fact, and experience the space is as significant. It can change the very nature of the project irrespective of the process. So with some of the projects, I would say it could be after the fact, depending on what has happened to the project. So both are equally important in that sense.
And I think then adding to that, Aarati, it's also then the story becomes very important. And that's why probably Doshi wrote the story after everything happened. It's not that he's writing before and he doesn't have a pre-planned agenda. And after this, if you read the story in conjunction with looking at the Gufa, it really brings out different aspects of it. Otherwise, maybe if people are not aware of that process, it can be passed off as another piece of architecture, another gallery. But that conversation, that the things that went into making it really make it more significant, I feel.
I would say all good architects tend to post-rationalize a lot. The post-rationalization is a whole myth that a lot of designers like to create. But Doshi is unique in creating the myth, which is conducive for his process, which becomes interesting.
And I think it's not just rationalization. I think it's also that connection that he makes between people, between the process, between the final product, and between memories, associations, the past, present, future. All that is so nicely woven into the story. When I say the story, it's not only the written story, it's the architectural story.
And the artistic story. Pallavi, I would agree with all of that. The fact of weaving in memories, ideas, thoughts, mythology, history, the present, and perhaps the future as well. But to my mind, the present, the process can only be as important as the product as well. I think the two are in tandem. That Jugalbandi also exists. Also because at some stage you leave the process behind and the product is what you're left with. And the product is what gives it the longevity over a period of time, the dynamic that follows. And that story now is no longer the architects or the artists. That story is every individual visitor's story to that space. And I think that is what the Gufa's celebration is all about.
Right. And with that, I think we could sit here and continue this conversation. But hopefully with this much background now, any visit to the Gufa is going to be even more meaningful. And I want our audience to stay in touch with us, and maybe someday we can put a group together and make a group visit to the Gufa. But this has been really very enjoyable. I want to thank our panelists, and I also want to thank our partners at Wrightwood for partnering with us on this. And I'm going to hand off to Brad White with Wrightwood to close out this session. Brad?
Good morning, I'm Brad White from Wrightwood 659. And I want to thank all of our panelists. I just thought this was fantastic. And I could have sat here and listened much longer, particularly to this conversation that was going on towards the end. I also want to thank the South Asia Institute for co-sponsoring this with us. And I would be remiss if I didn't call out special thanks to Asad and Aruj from the South Asia Institute, and Ashley, one of my colleagues at Wrightwood 659. Without their knowledge, their research skills, and understanding of the unique relationship between B.V. Doshi and M.F. Husain, we would not have had this compelling panel. And I really appreciate their work on this, as well as all of your work on this. Under normal circumstances, our current exhibition, Balkrishna Doshi, Architecture for the People, would be open today. However, due to the recent restrictions in Illinois, that is not the case. To borrow a quote from Doshi, form should not be finite but amorphous, so that the experience within it is loose, meandering, and multiple. The uncertainty of gathering in physical spaces has made virtual programs such as this all the more important, expanding the finite access to exhibition content. We encourage you to attend other digital events with Wrightwood 659 and the South Asia Institute. You can go to either of our websites and see what's coming up in the coming weeks and months ahead. And including, we will be having 2 different conversations that will include Doshi himself. I thank you again very much to all of the participants and to the South Asia Institute. And thank you and stay safe.